In the spring of 1637, in the city of Haarlem, in the Dutch Republic, a single tulip bulb sold for the price of a luxurious house on a canal in Amsterdam. Not a field of tulips, not a garden. One bulb. One small, brown, unremarkable lump of plant matter that, when planted, would produce a single flower for a few weeks each spring. The bulb was a Semper Augustus, a variety with vivid red and white streaks, caused, as we now know, by a virus that infected the plant. At the height of the mania, a single Semper Augustus bulb could be exchanged for the equivalent of 15 years of skilled labor wages. Records from the period describe trades involving multiple oxen, hundreds of pounds of cheese, full sets of clothing, beds, silver cups, and entire estates, all for individual flower bulbs. By the time the bubble burst in February of 1637, fortunes had been built and destroyed in months. Skilled craftsmen had abandoned their workshops to trade in tulips. Sailors had mortgaged their ships. Magistrates had bet their salaries. And then, almost overnight, the price of a Semper Augustus collapsed by 99%. Buyers vanished. Contracts could not be enforced. The market evaporated. The Dutch did not become temporarily insane in 1636. They became socially synchronized. They watched their neighbors make money trading tulips, and they wanted to be part of it. They watched their neighbors get rich, and they could not bear to be the one left behind. The price of a tulip bulb stopped reflecting the value of a flower. It began reflecting the value of belonging to the crowd that was getting wealthy from flowers. This is the bandwagon effect, the cognitive bias that causes people to adopt beliefs and behaviors primarily because other people are adopting them, regardless of the underlying merit. And the tulip mania of 1637 was not the first or the last time it would set the global economy on fire.
The bias is older than economics. It is older than civilization. It is wired into the architecture of the social brain. In 1951, a Polish-American psychologist named Solomon Asch designed an experiment so simple that the results felt impossible. He gathered groups of 8 college students into a room and told them they were participating in a vision test. They would be shown 2 cards. The first card had a single line on it. The second card had 3 lines of varying lengths. Their task was to identify which line on the second card matched the length of the line on the first. The correct answer was obvious. The lines were dramatically different in length. The difference between them was as clear as the difference between a 6-inch ruler and a 10-inch ruler. Anyone with normal vision could identify the match in under a second. But 7 of the 8 students in each group were not real subjects. They were actors, instructed by Asch to give the same wrong answer in unison. Only the 8th student, sitting near the end of the row, was a genuine participant. The actors went around the room, one by one, confidently identifying the wrong line. By the time the real subject's turn arrived, they faced a choice. Trust their own eyes, which clearly showed the correct answer, or conform to the group, which had unanimously declared something else. Approximately 75% of the genuine subjects conformed at least once, giving an answer they could see was wrong. Across all trials, conformity occurred in roughly 1/3 of cases. People denied the evidence of their own eyes to avoid standing alone against a unanimous group. When Asch interviewed the conformers afterward, some confessed that they had known the group was wrong, but went along to avoid social discomfort. Others, more disturbingly, reported that they had begun to genuinely doubt their own perception. that the pressure of the unanimous majority had made them question what they were seeing. The visual cortex was outvoted by the social brain. Decades later, neuroscientist Gregory Burns at Emory University replicated the Asch experiment inside an fMRI brain scanner. He wanted to see what happens neurologically when a person resists or conforms to group pressure. When subjects conformed to obviously wrong answers, the brain regions that activated were not the ones associated with conscious decision-making. They were the regions involved in spatial perception itself. The conformers were not lying about what they saw. Their brains had been pushed by social pressure into actually perceiving the situation differently. When subjects resisted the group and gave the correct answer, a completely different region activated, the right amygdala, the seat of fear and emotional pain. Standing alone against a unanimous majority literally hurt. The brain coded social isolation as a threat, like physical danger. The conclusion is uncomfortable but unmistakable. The bandwagon effect is not weakness of character. It is the operation of neural circuitry that evolved to keep our ancestors aligned with their group, because in the ancestral environment, separation from the group meant death. The lone hunter starved. The lone gatherer was killed by predators. The lone dissenter was exiled, and exile was a death sentence. We are the descendants of the conformers. The independent thinkers were eaten. And this ancient survival instinct now shapes the modern financial markets in ways that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors crouching in caves. 360 years after the tulip mania, the same psychology produced the dot-com bubble. By the late 1990s, internet companies with no profits, no products, and sometimes no business plan were valued at billions of dollars on public stock exchanges. A company could add the words .com to its name and see its share price double in a week. Investors knew, on some level, that the valuations were absurd. Veteran traders warned of a bubble. Economists published papers documenting the impossibility of the underlying math. But the prices kept rising. And as long as the prices kept rising, getting out felt like the most expensive mistake imaginable. The fear of missing the wave overrode the fear of being on a sinking one. Pension funds bought tech stocks because pension funds were buying tech stocks. Individual investors bought tech stocks because their neighbors were getting rich from tech stocks. The bandwagon was not a metaphor. It was a self-reinforcing pricing mechanism in which the act of buying drove prices higher, which attracted more buyers, which drove prices higher still. When the bubble finally burst in 2000, the NASDAQ index lost roughly 78% of its value. $5 trillion of paper wealth evaporated. Companies that had been valued at billions went bankrupt within months. The tulips had simply changed color. The dot-com crash should have been a cautionary tale that ended the bandwagon dynamic in financial markets forever. It was not. 8 years later, the global housing market collapsed under the same psychological forces. Homebuyers convinced that prices could only go up, banks issuing loans they knew were dangerous because their competitors were doing the same, and the entire financial system marching together over a cliff because nobody wanted to step out of line. In 2021, the pattern repeated again on social media. A group of users on a forum called Wall Street Bets identified that hedge funds had massively shorted the stock of GameStop, a struggling video game retailer. The forum users coordinated a buying spree, driving the stock from around $20 to over $480 in a matter of weeks. Most of the buyers had never set foot in a GameStop. They were not investing in the company, they were joining a movement. The chat threads were filled with rocket emojis, war metaphors, and cries of solidarity. Selling was framed as betrayal. Holding was framed as heroism. The bandwagon had become a tribal identity. When the price collapsed, many of the late buyers, the ones who joined the movement at $300 or $400 per share, lost everything. They had not been investing. They had been belonging. And the price they paid for belonging was financial ruin. The cryptocurrency markets have produced multiple cycles of the same dynamic in compressed timeframes. A new coin appears. Influencers promote it. Prices rise. More people buy because prices are rising. Prices rise further. Social media fills with screenshots of paper gains. New buyers pour in, terrified of missing the next big thing. Prices peak. Insiders sell to the late arrivals. Prices collapse. The newest buyers are left holding tokens worth a fraction of what they paid. The cycle is not a flaw in cryptocurrency. It is the bandwagon effect operating at the speed of digital communication, with the same fundamental psychology that drove the Dutch to trade their houses for flower bulbs in 1636. But the bandwagon does not only operate in financial bubbles. It shapes consumer behavior in ways most people never recognize. A restaurant in a tourist district understands this principle perfectly. They will deliberately seat the first customers of the evening at tables visible from the street. Empty restaurants stay empty. Restaurants with even a few visible diners attract more diners. The visual signal of other people having chosen this place becomes the primary reason new people choose it. Some restaurants will pay friends or employees to sit at the front tables during the early evening hours, eating slowly, creating the appearance of activity. The investment pays for itself many times over. Social proof is more persuasive than menus, prices, or food quality. We do not eat where the food is best. We eat where other people are eating. The fashion industry runs on the bandwagon effect at an industrial scale. A celebrity is photographed wearing a particular brand of sneaker. Within weeks, those sneakers are sold out in every major city. The shoes have not changed. Their construction, comfort, and price are identical to the day before the photograph was taken. What changed is the social signal that wearing these shoes means belonging to a particular tribe. Fast fashion brands have built entire business models around tracking which celebrities and influencers wear which items, then producing cheap copies within days. The original product matters less than the bandwagon it generates. By the time the trend fades, the brand has already sold millions of units to people who were buying belonging, not clothing. The book industry illustrates the same dynamic. A new novel is released. It receives modest initial reviews and sales. Then, a celebrity book club selects it. Within 48 hours, the book jumps to the top of the bestseller list. Bookstores cannot keep it in stock. The same book that was selling slowly the day before is now a cultural phenomenon. Not because the writing improved, but because being seen reading it became a social signal. Studies of bestseller lists have found that the act of being on a bestseller list is itself the primary driver of subsequent sales. Books that crack the top 10 sell several times more copies than nearly identical books that stop at number 11. The threshold is psychological, not literary. Buyers want what other buyers are buying. Restaurants with visible lines outside their doors generate more lines. Apps with high download counts attract more downloads. Videos with high view counts attract more views. The metric becomes the cause of itself. This is why social media platforms display engagement numbers so prominently. The visible like count, the visible follower count, the visible share count are not just information. They are bandwagon triggers, designed to convert observed popularity into actual popularity. Politics is the most consequential arena where the bandwagon effect operates. Voters consistently demonstrate a preference for candidates they perceive as winning. Polls showing a candidate ahead generate additional support for that candidate, simply because being on the winning side feels better than being on the losing side. Political scientists have documented this for decades. The bandwagon effect in elections is so powerful that some countries restrict the publication of opinion polls in the days before voting, specifically to prevent the bandwagon from distorting the outcome. The voter who would have chosen the underdog on the merits often switches to the frontrunner when the frontrunner status is broadcast loudly enough. The danger compounds in primary elections, where supporters of multiple candidates within the same party must coordinate. A candidate who looks viable attracts donations, volunteers, and media coverage, which makes them more viable, which attracts more support. A candidate who looks weak loses donations, volunteers, and coverage, which makes them weaker. The race is decided not by the merits of the candidates, but by the cascading consequences of early bandwagon dynamics. Charitable giving displays the bandwagon effect in ways that distort how resources flow toward human suffering. A natural disaster generates intense media coverage. Donations pour in. Other donors see the donations and add their own. The total raised vastly exceeds what the initial damage would have predicted, because each donation makes the next donation more likely. Meanwhile, ongoing crises, chronic poverty, preventable disease, slow-moving humanitarian disasters, receive a fraction of the funding, even when they cause far more total suffering. The crisis without media coverage cannot start a bandwagon. Donors have nobody to follow. The need is invisible. A 2017 study by researchers at the University of Bristol found that charity donations for high-profile disasters were dramatically inflated by social proof effects, while equally severe but less visible crises received chronic underfunding. The brain donating to the cause is not calculating need, it is calculating belonging. The pattern even shapes science, which is supposed to be the most objective domain in human knowledge. When a particular research direction becomes fashionable, funding flows toward it. Graduate students choose it, journals publish papers about it, and the field appears productive. The popularity of the direction becomes self-reinforcing. Researchers go where the funding is, and the funding follows where the researchers are. This is how entire decades of scientific work can be devoted to theories that turn out to be wrong. Not because individual scientists were dishonest, but because the social dynamics of the field rewarded conformity to the dominant paradigm and punished the heretics who pursued alternative hypotheses. The bandwagon does not stop at the laboratory door. Thomas Kuhn documented this in his 1962 book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, describing how scientific progress often happens not through gradual accumulation of evidence, but through periodic, painful upheavals when the dominant paradigm finally collapses under its accumulated contradictions and a new paradigm takes its place. Between revolutions, the bandwagon rules. So how do you defend yourself against a force that is wired into your nervous system and exploited by every market, election, and cultural institution you encounter? The first defense is to ask, before any decision, a question that almost no one asks. Would I want this if no one else was choosing it? The stock you are about to buy, the restaurant you are about to enter, the product you are about to order, the candidate you are about to vote for. Would you choose them if they were unpopular? If the answer is no, you may not be making a choice at all. You may be following a herd. The second defense is to deliberately seek out the dissenting view. Every market consensus has critics. Every popular product has detractors. Every winning candidate has people who can articulate why they are wrong. Find them. Read them. Not because they are right, but because their existence proves that the unanimous wisdom of the crowd is rarely as unanimous as it appears. The third defense is to remember Asch's experiment every time you feel the pull of a unanimous majority. The lines on the cards were obviously different in length. The actors were obviously wrong, and yet 75% of perfectly intelligent people conformed at least once. You are not smarter than them. You are wired the same way. The only protection is the deliberate, effortful refusal to let social pressure override the evidence in front of you. The bandwagon effect was adaptive in the ancestral environment. The tribe that moved together survived. The dissenter who wandered off alone was eaten by the leopard. We are alive today because our ancestors followed the herd. But the herd in the modern world is not running from predators. It is running toward speculative bubbles, fashionable products, sensational headlines, and political movements that may or may not have any basis in reality. The instinct that kept our ancestors alive on the savannah is now leading their descendants over the cliff edges of every market, every election, and every cultural moment. The Dutch tulip traders were not stupid. They were human. They were watching their neighbors get rich and asking themselves the only question their nervous systems were equipped to ask: how can I be part of this? The question they should have asked was different. Not, what is everyone else doing, but what is the actual value of the thing I am about to buy? The answer, in the case of a tulip bulb, was a few cents. The answer, in the case of nearly every bubble that has followed, has been similarly humble. When the herd finally stops running and the late arrivals look down at what they are holding, they discover they have paid an enormous price for something that was only valuable while everyone agreed it was valuable. The herd does not protect you from being wrong. The herd is what makes being wrong feel safe. Until the moment it does.